Order in the House. We are about to begin the debate. Thank you very much. First of all, you guys can have a seat. Yeah. First of all, thank you very much to everyone for being here. It has been a very interesting, but I'm sure very exhausting past 2 days. And so thank you so much, everyone, for being here. The motion before you, the audience, is this House believes that universities are increasingly irrelevant. And you, the audience, will be the jury of this motion. You will decide whether or not this motion fails or passes this House. So a quick introduction to the format. Each speaker will present his argument for 7 minutes. We have 4 speakers. Arguing for the motion will speak first, followed by against the motion, and the second speaker for the motion, and then again the second speaker against the motion. This will be followed by a 15 to 20-minute question period in which I will challenge each speaker's arguments. Then we will move to closing arguments, 3 minutes each, and then the final vote. Before we begin, I want to better define what we mean by universities. When we mean universities, we mean really to the traditional 4-year bricks and mortars type that grants bachelor's degrees, and that's the and so that's the motion we're arguing today. So before we begin this debate, this very lively debate, I would like to ask each member of the audience to now vote if you agree or disagree. We will show the results at the end of the debate. If this is your keypad, you have 10 seconds to vote. You press 1 if you agree with the motion that universities are increasingly irrelevant, and you vote 2 if you disagree with the motion that universities are increasingly irrelevant. Please take 10 seconds to make your choice. Your final choice will be locked in, so you can press it multiple times. So please go ahead. Great. So you made your vote. I want to ask 2 questions before we begin. Who in the audience has not been to university? Okay, that's pretty clear. Okay. All right, yes. Okay. I missed that. Okay, yes. We have some high school students who have not been to university yet. Okay. Second question is, if you are a parent, would you please raise your hand if you are choosing not to send your child to university? Okay, we have exactly 1. Okay, yes, okay. So the 4 team definitely have their work cut out for them, okay? So let us begin. Let me first introduce the first speaker for the motion, Jamie McAuliffe, who is the CEO of Education for Employment, an organization dedicated to helping young people in the Middle East find jobs. So 7 minutes, Jamie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, your questions previewed my opening comments, which is that I stand here with a very heavy heart to argue this motion. I am the product of university education, a master's degree. I'm also the product of 2 academics, 2 professors. My mother was the president of a university. So I really have my work cut out for me. And the answers in this room confirm one of the arguments that our side will make, which is that university, for a very small percentage of people, for the very elite, works out very well. But you know what? For the vast majority of other young people who go through university, the answer is not the same. Let me tell you a little bit about the part of the world that we work in, the Middle East and North Africa. Education for employment actually shouldn't exist. We're filling a gap that the universities and the school systems are not filling. We're having to come in and bridge the gap between university and work because universities around the region are not preparing young people with the kinds of skills that employers and the jobs of today and tomorrow are requiring. So most of the education system in our part of the world, and actually in a lot of in other regions of the world, is education for unemployment. Is that what we want our universities to be about? Is that what we want our schools to be about? To be educating many more young people at many higher degrees to languish without a job, without opportunity. So our organization is dealing with that day in, day out. I'll give you two small stories. Gada in Tunisia. From a very early age, she dreamt of being an engineer. Many young people in the Middle East and North Africa feel that engineering is a passport to a great future. She went through a university in Tunisia, she got her degree, and for 3 years, she looked for a job. She could not find one. There are not enough jobs for engineers. So instead, she had to go through a training program like ours to get skilled up with very specific skills that were asked for in the job market, in this case, project management skills. Another woman, Ilem, went to school and studied economics in Palestine. She also had a dream, and her parents believed that college and university was a ticket to success and to a lifetime of new opportunity. Once again, she left university, and she couldn't find a job for many, many months until she was able to connect with training and specific skill building that's not provided in the schools and university, but that employers and jobs require. These are just representative samples of millions of young people who are going through school. In the Middle East and North Africa, there are countries like Jordan that have twice the rate of unemployment for university graduates. How is that possible if universities are relevant? We're arguing that universities are increasingly irrelevant if that's the outcome they're producing. When you layer on the future of jobs, it gets even scarier. So more and more studies and reports are coming out talking about not only the skills that are needed today, but the jobs and skills of tomorrow. And the pace of change is so rapid that if we think that universities are failing to produce graduates that can find a job, move on with their life and their future, we are in even greater trouble as we think about the rapid pace of technological change and the kind of nimble, flexible learning systems that are going to have to get young people skilled up, reskilled, and into the job market. So if we are saying today that universities, as we are saying today, universities are increasingly irrelevant, when you layer on the future of jobs and skills and the importance of much more nimble, rapid learning, we have an even bigger problem. So I would sort of wrap my opening remarks on our side by saying that university, which as defined in the etymology of the word is a community of scholars, a community of learners, is an antiquated concept. We want to be promoting universal learning, lifelong learning, not a siloed, staged set of years that people go through, bricks and mortar, 4 years to get a degree, and as we've argued and will continue to argue, are producing graduates who have no prospect, and in some cases even less prospects than non-college graduates.
Thank you so much, Jamie. Speaking against the motion, first will be Geoff Canada, who is president and founder of the Harlem Children's Zone and currently is the chair of the Education Partners. So 7 minutes, Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Jamie, I'm going to tell your mother on you. Let me start out by reminding everyone that college and universities have not been a tool that's available to lots of disenfranchised people around this world. If you want to know what's the first thing people do when they colonize another people, they deny them education. Why is this? Why is it that for generations you have seen real resistance to folks who have been at the bottom of the economic and social ladders? You've seen real resistance to these people getting into schools. I would say that at the very time that many of us are making progress in developing young people who have the skills to compete successfully for jobs by getting those kids into college and through college, we have a movement suddenly of let's get rid of colleges. Now, I always tell folks, I am totally prepared to not send my kids to college when all the rich people stop sending their kids to college. At the point that that happens, I'll say maybe we have a fair system. But if you argue about the value proposition, is college so expensive? And I'm going to help out with this argument a little bit, that poor kids who borrow money to go to college can't pay back the loans, and so therefore it puts them at a disadvantage. I say yes, that is a solid argument, and it does happen. The answer to that argument is not to then say to those kids, you should not go to college. It's for us as a society to figure out ways of making college affordable so that price is not a reason to deny a kid a basic education. Let's say that when you think about college, and I know that folks have argued that it is not a pathway to employment. That may be the case in some parts of the world, but it is not a universal case. It is certainly not the case in the United States. And indeed, you have college graduates who are struggling to find employment. But when you look at the employment rates by college or non-college, you see a dramatic difference. And while I agree that the jobs are changing and we cannot tell the jobs of the future right now, and you may not get training that prepares you for that particular job, I will tell you another role that colleges and universities play. For people, again, who are at the bottom rungs of society, they are credentialed. They are a way of saying, I deserve to be considered. We know what happens in lots of places. You face discrimination. You face folks who say, you know, I wish you had a skill set, and therefore we would give you the job. Well, one of the ways you deal with that is making sure folks have a credential that says, I have a minimum set of skills that should allow me to have access to these jobs. I think when you take away the credential, we're back to saying, what's the decision being made on? And I think we have a history of a decision being made on race or religion or the sex, and not basically on whether or not a person has a skill set that prepares them for this job. So while I am open to the fact that we need to focus education, we need to spend some additional time making sure young people know what your job chances are if you decide to become an art history major, right? That's not necessarily going to open up lots. I will tell you this. If young people are prepared and can apply and go to college, if at some point after graduating college they want to pursue a different set of skills, they have been prepared to do so. One of the great advantages of college, it should be teaching you how to study on your own, how to learn on your own, so that when that job changes, you have an ability to go out and learn a new set of skills, not starting from the basics. So while I would argue there are lots of challenges with college, universities, I would also argue that this is exactly the wrong time for us to be deciding we're going to change the game and say that college is irrelevant. Mr. Speaker, I will now rest.
Thank you so much, Geoff. Speaking for the motion, the second speaker for the motion is Irene Tinagli, who is an Italian economist as well as a member of Parliament. Please, Irene.
Thank you. Well, I think we have to agree on what the motion is. The motion is not about, let's get rid of college. The motion is about a warning, a message. College, universities are not doing what they should be doing. And of course, for some of us, they're still doing fine. As Jamie was saying before, we know, most of us, I mean, all of us, went to colleges, probably to good universities. They will send their kids to good universities as well. They have the privilege of being able to get all the information, know which one works better, and know which one opens greater possibilities and opportunities, and it will work for them the same way it worked for them. But is this the true reality we find out there? It is what we are finding for millions and millions of kids that do not come from families that can guide them, can get the information, can support them through this path to great universities that will grant them the opportunity and the privilege of discovering how to fly, how to learn, how to be someone in the future. That's not what's going on in the rest of the world, and actually increasingly even in our own societies. We've been selling this dream for a long time because that was our dream in the past. That was the system that we built and we've been exporting. In the past 10, 15 years, number of graduates in India went from 1 million to 7.3 million every year. In China, there are 5 million graduates every year. Or maybe it's the other way around. I think in India it's 5 million and in China it's 7.3 million. So it's increasing at this pace. But you know what is happening? That in China right now, estimates say that 30% of those graduates cannot find a job. They are totally unemployed. And you know what's the unemployment rate for the kids who didn't have any degree? It's 4%. So those kids made a strong investment, sacrificed for themselves, their families, and they're sitting home waiting for the chance and the opportunity to show they learned how to learn, to show that they learned something and can do something out of their lives. And this is not happening. And you know the worst thing is that statistics say that this is worse for the kids that come from rural families, of course, than it is from the kids from urban and more wealthy families. This is going on in China, it's going on in India, but it's increasingly going on even in our own countries and societies. I come from Italy, and we have an increasing problem of graduates struggling to get a job. And it's true, if you look at the statistics, overall, graduates still fare better in terms of jobs of opportunities compared to non-college degree, non-graduates. But if you look, these statistics include everyone, the oldest and the youngest. If you focus on the younger ones, you can see that the situation is getting worse and worse. And the unemployment rate for the adults with a college degree compared to the young with a college degree, it's almost twofold. So the young graduates have a double rate of unemployment compared to the adults with college degree. So this is going on in other countries. It's going on even in the United States. There was a report by the Federal Reserve in New York that was very revealing about this trend of especially recent graduates struggling to find their own way, to find a job. And you know another phenomenon? To be underemployed, to find jobs for which they didn't need a degree. Actually, what they say, you know, we are teaching in all these universities kids something they will not need, and 44% of them will end up in jobs that didn't require a university degree. But in the meantime, they would have made sacrifices, ended up with big loans and debts on their shoulders that will have to repay for that. And the funny thing is that there are sectors in which this statistics is even worse. So we have sectors where 50 to 60% of the graduates employed didn't need a college degree to get there. And it's not just manufacturing. If you look at the sectors, it's not just manufacturing. Even for technologies, for communications, employer says, for this job, you didn't need a college degree. So we should be questioning this, and we should be challenging university system, governments to do better what they should be doing, granting these kids the opportunity to fulfill their dreams.
Thank you so much. So speaking against the motion, the second speaker is Lorna Solis, who is the founder and CEO of Blue Rose Compass, an NGO dedicated to helping the children of refugees get into university. So our second speaker.
Thank you,
7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So just to start, Jamie, if we don't have universities, actually what we do is we guarantee that we have no more middle class. So I completely rebuttal what you said. I think only the elites would be able to afford a higher private education. We would eliminate the middle class. So it's completely the opposite of what I think you said. Regarding, I don't hear Bill Gates, who dropped out from Harvard, saying don't go to school. Instead, he's spending billions of dollars, especially in the US, on education because he, who's a Harvard dropout, understands you need that degree. If you don't have that degree, we basically guarantee you're going to have a very, very difficult life. Talking about innovation and universities, where MOOCs have come from are from universities. They are the ones who actually created MOOCs, all the best online systems there from Harvard, Columbia, and it's to complement the universities. They understand that not everyone can attend and go to a brick and mortar, and they're the ones who innovated this. It came from them. So the fact that they're irrelevant, they're the ones who are building this for the masses who cannot go to a brick and mortar, but it's to complement. We know a high school degree and a university degree is what's going to set you apart at a job, for sure. The moment you walk into a job and you say, I went to X school, you already have X salary. It's set. And this is just reality. It's what it is. I mean, we did a raising of hands here. Everyone went to university in this room, and if you hadn't, I'm sure you wish you had. There's critical thinking that's taught at university that is not taught just by online, sitting in your room far away from a brick and mortar institution where you sit with friends and you're taught critical thinking in class. That is incredibly important in any kind of job. So I work with refugees in the Middle East, Sub-Saharan Africa, around the world. And I can tell you, when I take a refugee out of the bubble, I call it the bubble, because when you're in a camp or you're in a country that doesn't want you, you have to leave home because of a war or some climate change disaster. And you're in this bubble. When the kids come out, and I take them to universities all around the world, I have refugees going to Harvard right now. And I can tell you that they tell me, you know, I have a Palestinian kid who was in Gaza, and he's now at Harvard. And he said, after 3 months of being there, he says, I never understood. I thought Palestinians were the most hated people on earth. And I have an Indian roommate, a Chinese roommate, and a Nigerian roommate. And you know what? They have it as bad as we do. And it's even worse. And I never knew this. And if it weren't for him getting out of his bubble and going to a university and meeting kids from different parts of the world, he would have never come up with this. He's no longer a victim. He's no longer his own victim. He sees the world in a different way. He's met people from other parts of the world. The world, and going out of your bubble and going to a university and meeting kids from other parts of the world will make you absolutely change your way of thinking, of how you see the world, how you see yourself. And only a brick and mortar institution can do that. Is that 4 minutes? I don't know. I talk a lot. I'm Latin. I've been black forever. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so both parties have presented their opening arguments, and now we will begin the question period. So my first question is for the speakers for the motion. So having heard the arguments from Geoff and Lorna, they argue that university serves three important functions. First is to give students credentials so that when they enter society, they have the confidence and status to do well. Second is that universities teach students how to think, teach critical thinking skills, and teach students how to adapt to new environments. And the third thing, as Lorna just said, is that universities open students' eyes to new possibilities. They help students build social networks, meet friends that they could not meet anywhere else. These seem to me three very powerful arguments that you guys are wrong. So please respond to these three arguments.
I'd like to start by quoting my esteemed colleague from his lunch yesterday, where he said that universities are modeled on
Your
a
esteemed colleague is who?
Mr. Canada here.
Okay, yes. So just so we're clear.
That universities are structured on a factory model. I mean, the universities as we currently see them today, the 4 years, very siloed courses and material and specialties and people going through is modeled on a factory approach and was preparing people for an industrial workforce. We are not arguing that there's a small number, and I'm a big fan of Lorna's work as well, but how many people are getting into that program? A very, very small minority. The vast majority of young people are going through university and not getting those skills, or not getting the kind of exposure and opening up to new communities. So I think what we're saying is that university is not the answer to the set of things that our opponents are mentioning. Credential. Why should university be the credential? Google now doesn't even look at candidates' degrees. They ask them to do tests on skills that they know make the person successful. Because in fact, a degree can work the opposite from Mr. Canada's point, which is supposed to level the playing field. A degree can actually be a sorting mechanism, because some degrees from some universities are well respected. In many of the countries we operate, public university students are discriminated against because employers do not believe that they are getting quality education. So how is that fulfilling the promise of university as a credential that everybody admires? Again, comes back to a very small number of Williams grads and Harvard grads with a degree. Yes, I agree, that's a great credential. But what we could do is rethink what a credential means and really make it about credentials that mean something in the real world of work. That's the first point. The second, teaching kids how to think. This is, again, our argument. Most universities are not teaching kids how to think. Most universities are still structured in a lecture format where kids are absorbing information, and we think that that is obsolete. Kids do need critical thinking, but they need it with simulated work environments. They need work and school together. They need multiple pathways for learning and work, and universities are not providing that, the traditional four-year bricks and mortar university, where we really think we need to reconceive the whole notion of university and ongoing learning and lifelong learning.
Yeah, please.
Do you mind? Yeah. Just to add one thing about the fact that universities, as they are, maybe they don't give you all the skills, but they teach you how to learn, how to be open, how to get adapt to situations and blah, 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 to get the self-confidence to face the world. And I thought that way when I was at Carnegie Mellon, and I felt so full of confidence and proud and everything. And then I left academia, I entered politics, and now I receive tons and tons of emails of parents, mothers and fathers, and young adults who've been through college. They haven't been to Carnegie Mellon or to Harvard or to Yale or whatever. They've been to the college around the corner. We've doubled the supply of universities everywhere. Now we've doubled how many, every corner you have in universities, and kids go there and they think, I'm getting a degree, I'll get the confidence, I'll have the opportunity, I have a full life of hopes. And they're not getting that. And they send me emails and they said, I'm sitting in my room, I'm sending tens and tens of applications and nobody even bothered to answer me. I want an opportunity to show what I learned. And these kids, what happens? They lose the confidence. They don't even know who they are anymore. And I think this is a shame and this is a crime. And so that's why we should tell universities, you are getting irrelevant because you are betraying the dreams.
Thank you so much. My next question is, order in the house, please. Order in the house. My next question is for Geoff and Lorna. Lorna, you did say that Bill Gates, a tech billionaire, never mentioned that going to university was a bad idea. But we have a tech billionaire, Peter Thiel, who does say that. In fact, he says that universities are a scam, just like what those arguing in favor of the motions say. He points to the fact that right now in the United States, student debt, university debt, totals over $1 trillion. Meanwhile, if you are a U.S. student entering university right now, you can expect to graduate with 30,000 U.S. in debt. Employers themselves complain that universities are not graduating, that students are not graduating with the skills necessary for the workplace. So please respond to their arguments and to Peter Thiel's point that university is a scam and a bubble waiting to burst.
Peter Thiel graduated from Stanford undergrad and law school, by the way. So it's not so nice.
But just to point this out, this is not refuting their argument, which is that if you go to a few elite schools, this will favor you in life. But for most people who go to very average schools, there's no benefit, or it could even hurt them.
No, I absolutely disagree. I think any education at a university, even if it's a big university, I think absolutely it's going to help you. It's going to give you an advantage at a job. And again, Peter Thiel went to Stanford. It's so great. I wish he had gone to one of those schools, and then let's see where he's at today with
What
PayPal.
Specifically about university? What skills does university teach you that is specific to the workplace that will benefit you in the workplace specifically?
Yeah, and I'll tell you something that universities are doing now that are even helping more, and they continue innovating. There are entrepreneurship degrees that never existed before. They are seeing that what's needed out in the world. We need more entrepreneurs. There are entrepreneurship degrees, there are accelerators, incubators at university. Stanford is one of the best examples for that. There's also the B School. I mean, so universities are continuing to evolve and are improving. They're not irrelevant. And the question here is if they're irrelevant, by the way. It's not that it's, just to correct what you had said. So it actually is if they are irrelevant. They're not irrelevant. Peter Thiel is an example of someone who went to university and he's where he's at today because of his education at Stanford. So he's one of the best examples to prove my point. So I mean, like I said, innovation continues to happen and evolve at universities. They are adapting. They are the ones who created the MOOCs, and they're absolutely the ones who are out there trying to see where the gaps are and trying to fill those gaps. There are sister universities being built in remote areas now that never existed before. They care about the world. It's not just about come to Georgetown. There's actually a Georgetown in Doha. I mean, this did not exist before. Things are progressing, I even think, with those elite schools. They're broadening and going to places where they never thought they would have a brick and mortar from before.
Yes.
Great. I would just like to add that I think one of the problems people are having is this issue about the current employment state that the world finds itself in education. So let's just talk about China a second. Yes, most of the manufacturing and other jobs from the US did go to China, so those folks have jobs now for how long? Do you think those low-skilled jobs are going to go to another country? And guess what China's going to be faced with? Huge unemployment, the same way America was faced with huge unemployment when we lost all of our manufacturing jobs. The answer to that is to constantly make sure you're upgrading your citizens' skills, so as these trends come and go, you have an ability to adapt. And that's what we're talking. If you go to places that have made huge bets that a certain skill will remain there forever, let's say Detroit, right? They made a huge bet. Cars are going to be here. We're going to get jobs. We don't have to get education as a way. What happens when the car industry moves on? Well, you have whole communities that fail because no one was thinking, I better prepare these kids for college and university, so even if they have to leave Detroit and go somewhere else, they have a set of skills which are at least transportable. So I think the fact that the world went through a huge recession, which really hit this generation of college kids, and it did delay their entry into the labor market, let's not confuse that with the fact that this world is increasingly calling for a sophisticated set of skills which will change over time, and the folks who are going to be best able to meet that change are going to be folks who have higher skills, and the place you gain those higher skills are at the university. And they don't have to be just math and science skills. There's the writing, there's the speaking, there's the ability to collaborate, to get along with others, and to understand that you have to be able to tolerate folks who are different than you are, which you often run into different ideas that are often foreign to folks who don't go to colleges and universities, that you have to hear them, debate them, believe them or not. I think that's actually instructive and is going to help keeping our world going in a place of less and less sort of isolation as we realize the world is becoming a smaller, more connected place.
Okay, Geoff, I have a question for you.
Yes.
I have a statistic that I looked up online. You can Google it if you want right now. But right now in America, there are 3 to 4 million jobs that are not filled because we don't know why. It could be because people don't apply, people are not interested. But a lot of these jobs are good manufacturing jobs in America. Yeah. They're good jobs, they pay well, and people are not applying. Yeah. So my question for you is, when you mentioned university education should be underwritten by society because it's a social good. But we're not taxpayers we better serve to send students to vocational colleges where they could do manufacturing and then pay taxes.
So I know that these situations exist where you have these mismatches, right? You've got a need for people with certain technical skills, and you don't have schools producing those folk. And that happens. That happens in every economy, in every region. And the answer is not to train a whole nation with the assumption that that's going to be the case, the same case in New York as it's going to be in Oklahoma, as it's going to be in Denver. Where you see huge construction booms, you suddenly have a need for lots more electricians. But guess what happens when the boom goes, right? There goes the jobs. The question is, how do you prepare a flexible workforce that's able to adapt? You will always have these mismatches, and I don't deny that part of what colleges and universities have to do is sort of think about local and regional economies and how they prepare folks to go into that. But that that does not mean that young people having a broad set of educational skills does not put them at an advantage. And I think that, I read something from Google that about 25% of the taxi drivers in New York have college degrees, right? I said, guess what it means if you don't have that? You're probably not going to be able to drive a taxi. Given the odds, I'm just being serious, given the odds that I can hire somebody with a college degree or someone who dropped out of school in the 8th grade, guess who I'm going to hire? And when the labor market changes, those folks will get different jobs. So I think there is some push and pull on this, the macro forces that push labor from one place to the other, which, I think has dislocated lots of jobs and opportunity in this country. It's something the whole world is facing.
Jeff.
They're facing it in Italy, they're facing it in the US, but saying that education, therefore, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful, Speaker, is sort of not valid, I don't agree with.
Okay, Jeff, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I will
Okay.
because it's important. Because what you're saying is that a university education that trains you how to think is very valuable. They're not disagreeing with that. What they're saying, though, is that's not what most universities are doing. Yeah. Students are not being taught how to think in universities. The lecture format is an antiquated model.
Yes, but I'm challenging the premise that you can predict what kids are going to need 5 or 7 years from now, right? I think people think, well, right now we should be training more people in this. So I'll just give you an example. I had people arguing about organizing Uber and whether Uber was going to need to be organized because you have all of these folks with jobs, they're not getting pensions. And here's the challenge with technology. You've got all these self-driving cars, all the Uber people are going to be unemployed. You can't just think about today and think you can make a bet on what the future is going to be tomorrow. We need kids with broad, flexible skills who are going to be able to adapt to a changing labor market. And I think that's the role that colleges and universities are playing. Could they do it better? I say yes. I'll tell you the other pushback on this issue is who determines which kids should go to college and which should go on this other track. Now, the problem with that is that every time we have left that to human beings, they have messed it up. They have done it by race, they have done it by religion, they have done it by sex. And so here, once we begin to say that there's another track kids should be on, right, that's not leading them into college, who makes that determination of who goes on that track? And I think that we have reason to be suspicious that those decisions will be made sort of on an equitable and fair basis.
Okay, I'll give you a break for now, Jeff. But
Okay.
so
I'll take the break, Mr. Speaker.
Jamie, I want to put you on the spot because what they're arguing is that universities teach you how to adapt to new environments. And the two examples that you gave of these young people who went to university sort of prove that, don't they? They graduated from university and maybe they didn't have skills that match the workplace immediately, but you were able to train them to match the workplace very quickly. So how would you respond to this?
Very simply, the young people that we work with never got a problem to solve in university, never used critical thinking in university, never learned how to communicate, never learned how to work with teams. The first time they learned all those things was in a practical training that we provided linked to the job market. Universities are not providing that kind of study. And I agree. I'm not saying universities are predicting and should predict the future jobs and the future industry. I'm actually saying exactly that it's changing so fast that universities are in the worst position to do that because of how they're structured. I mean, one of the things in this argument that strikes me as strange is I know Mr. Canada is a great advocate for reform in public education. He has been a great advocate for choice and charter school reform. Where's the reform in universities? Universities are largely still structured the way they were at the University of Bologna 300 years ago. You've got tenured professors with no practical experience. You've got degrees that you take years to complete. How is that system going to adapt to the changing and the even increasing pace of change in the world of work? That's what we're arguing, is that universities as they're currently structured are not up to the task. Not that there should not be an emphasis on education and opportunity. In fact, the opposite. Universities should be expanded. The learning life cycle should continue on through adulthood. And some of the countries that have aging demographics, they've got to go into retraining and reskilling. And there's got to be lifelong learning. That's part of the problem with universities. People think they go through university and then that's done. And that should be enough. And that's not enough. And it's been proven in country after country. And that's what we're arguing, is university is increasingly irrelevant as it is currently structured.
How do you respond to Jeff's point that universities are the fairest system that we have to grant status and legitimacy to the elite? If you took away universities, what else would you have?
I guess that I think that you have to distinguish what happens in the United States from the rest of the world. I mean, most of the university-educated people we're working with are public university graduates. They go through for free. So there's access. Access is not the issue. There is an issue of access with certain populations in the United States. I will not quibble with that. Access is not the issue in many other parts of the world. The issue is quality and what is happening when they graduate, and the disconnect between universities and the world of work. And that's what we're arguing universities are not prepared
Would
to
you go
address.
as far to say that Peter Thiel is right and that university students right now are being scammed? Most of them who go to mediocre schools are being scammed right now.
I think it's a very tough cost-benefit analysis if you go to a mediocre school and rack up tens of thousands of debt that you can't pay off for many, many years. It's a simple equation. I think for a lot of young people, it's just not worth the investment. Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Okay, so you've had your rest, Jeff. So now, student debt. Okay, all right. Student debt is a huge issue, political issue right now in the United States. Student debt now totals $1 trillion, and it's preventing young people from moving out of their parents' house. In fact, I once read statistics that said that right now, 1/3 of all 30-year-olds in America depend on some form of parental financial assistance. Mm-hmm. So their argument is that university could be good, but it's not actually worth the investment. It's too much money. How do you respond to that?
Yeah. What Fortune 500 company doesn't have debt? The way I see debt is you're investing in your future. I mean, if you don't go to school at all, you may be working at a Starbucks for the rest of your life. I mean, these are the choices. This is actually reality. We're not making this up. So debt, while it's not great, it's necessary. You are investing in your future. When you create a company, you have debt. You're thinking of the long term, not just the short term. So I work, as I said, with refugees. And if you look at Syrian refugees right now in Jordan, they're finally going to allow them to work in specific areas bordering Syria, which is where we're setting up a tech center. And while I send kids to phenomenal schools all over the world, we also are doing vocational training with app building with refugees in this one area. And these are the kids who are not going to get into these top schools elsewhere. So we're setting up these centers for a larger group of young adolescents. But what makes me sad is that this is going to be their future. This is it. This is going to be their job for a very, very long time. I'm putting them in a drawer and saying, you're going to be doing this tech job because this is what you're able to do in your life. You can't go to school. This is it for you. And while it's a solution, it's not great. I mean, I'd rather send them all to university so that they can think for themselves and think of entrepreneurial ideas that they can do for themselves, create businesses, small businesses, et cetera. They're not going to have that opportunity by just a vocational training kind of skill. And I'm a huge supporter and love what EFE does, and I know Jamie and Ron, who created EFE. And I understand that there's a larger scale of people versus what I do with my NGO, but if every kid could go to university, I think we can all agree that's a way better way to go. And I think universities are bending over backwards, creating ways in which it can be more affordable. I mean, the fact that Harvard, I have refugees at a camp, in Dadaab refugee camp in Kenya, who are looking at Harvard MOOCs. That's incredible. So, I mean, yeah, Harvard's far away, but guess what? Harvard's also there in the computer center in Dadaab, in this refugee camp. So while, yes, brick and mortar, I'd rather send them all to those schools. And not just Harvard, by the way, we're all over the place. We're UK, Germany, all over, everywhere. Phenomenal universities. But they are putting their hands out to these places. And again, my pool is the refugee pool, which is the biggest crisis we have right now in the world. And if these kids don't come out of those bubbles and are able to see the world differently, we will continue having the crisis we have today. The only option for them right now is join the military force or go work 4 mediocre jobs. That's not the future they want for themselves. That's not the future the parents want for them. So if I can, and we take the debt on. So, I mean, I'm saying invest in your future, have some debt. I mean, the kids that we put through school have no debt, and they finish, UCL with 0 invoice, 0.00, which is extraordinary. But, so I think that the debt is necessary because you are investing in a long term. And again, just to point, the Fortune 500 company, if you think of any company that's successful, they have debt. There's no such thing as a company without debt. It's investing in the long term.
I'd just like to, Mr. Speaker, support my partner's analysis. And one of the things I want to say is that I don't think either one of us are arguing that universities are perfect or universities don't need to have some kind of change. Now, let's just talk about student debt. And one of the things that's been happening in colleges and universities is that they have been increasing their tuition and room and board at a much higher rate than the cost of living or any other index that you would use, and that should be changed. When you look at student debt is the only debt in the United States that you can't erase in bankruptcy. Right now, and anyone who has money in a savings account knows that you're getting next to 0 as an interest payment, but students are carrying around 6, 7, 8% on their student debt. So there are lots of things we could do to make this system fairer for disadvantaged students. We could lower the interest rates and make them reasonable. We could really push colleges to make sure that they are looking at sort of giving young people a set of skills to help them become more employable. No one's arguing against that. What we're saying is that for millions and millions of young people around the world, the way to escape abject poverty is still going into the university and gaining a set of skills. And the ability to, I think, change those systems so that they become more equitable and fairer is something that we should do ourselves. I will say there are powerful interests pushing back against these changes, but we shouldn't allow that to therefore decide we're going to close the door for universities for lots of young people.
Okay. So I have a question for the opposition. I want to bring up the example of Finland, because Finland is an extremely progressive society. Schooling is free for everyone. Vocational school is free, but so is university. It's all free for students. If you look at what happens in Finland, more than half of students will choose to go to vocational college. And they're perfectly happy being plumbers and electricians. In fact, I would say that they find their lives just as meaningful as doctors and lawyers, and probably happier because they're less stressed. So they would say to you, why should I go to university? And if we make a society where the focus is on going to university, how is that fair to me? Shouldn't a society be diverse? Should not a society give people the option of what they want to study and who they want to be? And given the situation around the world today, as you say, university is a credential. So really, for a lot of people, there is no option but to go to university and incur extreme debt. So how would you respond to this?
So I think one of the, when you're talking about the Scandinavian countries, you really are talking about a history of treating its citizens much more fairly than you would find in most of the rest of the world. And I'll tell you a little dirty secret, though. In those countries, once you begin to have immigrants coming in, guess what you begin to see? A real sort of challenge with those groups being able to go into the majority society. So I think, to some degree, it's in a perfect system where everybody is treated fairly. Young people could feel perfectly good about saying, I don't want to be on a college track. Because you have plenty of examples of other folks who look like you, who come from your environment, who are making choices that allow this to be something that you consider to be normal. In places that have been denied access to education, to think that it's not going to be important for them to be able to go in and have increased access to these credentials, I think is a problem. So I do agree that in some places there's less of a stigma if you haven't graduated from college, and plumbers make a lot of money. Nothing's wrong with that. But you did mention half of them are still at the university. And the question is not whether or not you should get half of the folks in the university or not, it's whether or not universities are still relevant. And I would say they're as relevant in Denmark as they are in the US, meaning that kids still want to go and they still want to aspire to go to those places. Not all kids. By the way, not all kids in any country or in any ethnic or racial group want to go to college. But when places where young people have been denied that access, my belief is until that access is universal, we shouldn't change the game because I don't trust how we'll begin sorting people once we take the university out and that credential out of the equation.
Okay, just to remind the audience, Geoff is very clever. Actually, the motion is not, are universities relevant? The motion is, are universities increasingly irrelevant? Just to remind everyone, because he's very clever. Okay, so we are now moving to closing arguments. So each side will have a chance to speak for 3 minutes and sum up their arguments. So for the motion, we'll go first. 3 minutes, please.
Yes. So, ladies and gentlemen, members of the House, I understand the pain of admitting that the university system as we know it is increasingly irrelevant. I know it is hard. That's the system we've been through. That's the system we would like to give to our kids. But let's face it, it's not just in the numbers. We know in our hearts, in our minds, that it's not that way anymore. We know that this system now is not working, is not providing in general. If we look at what's happening in not only in China, in India, increasingly in our countries, we know that it's not working anymore. It's not fulfilling its premises. And yet we are afraid. We are afraid of saying it out loud. Why we are afraid? Because we are afraid of sending a message to the youth. As cleverly he was claiming, we are afraid of sending the message, don't go to college, don't go to university. And we don't want that. Of course we don't want that. We don't want that. We don't want to shut down universities. We don't want kids to abandon or renounce to go to universities. We want universities to change and to realize that they have to change. And that's the people that we want to hear the message. Because you know what? The students will realize that irrelevance by themselves. Even if we don't tell them, they will realize that, they will see that, and they will leave these opportunities even before we can tell them. And we are witnessing that in my country, for instance, in Italy, in the past 10 years only, we had a drop in university enrollment by 20%. Those kids, those families are giving up even before we warn them. And so before it's too late, before these kids completely lose their trust, their hopes into the university system, we should tell and urge this system to change. And that's the motion, and that's why I ask you to vote for it. Thanks.
Thank you, Irene. Lorna will now speak for the opposition. 3 minutes, please.
Thank you, Speaker of the House. As I said before, universities are absolutely adapting. They are innovating. They are the ones who created all the MOOCs. They see what's going on in the world. Most of the leaders that we have around the world, some good, some not so great, went to universities, most of them. And the great ones definitely have gone to universities. And universities want to produce exceptional leaders so they can go back into the world and do great things for their countries. I work in conflict zones. And it is so important that the youth, the young kids have that opportunity. As Geoff said, this is the demographic I worry about the most. It's areas in the Middle East, where we are at right now, especially in the areas I'm working in, the countries I'm working in, where they don't have any access. And these kids, we are putting them at harm's way. We're putting the world at harm's way. If we don't make sure that they have a degree and they're able to go to a university and they're able to have opportunities in the world, they don't have many choices right now. So it's not about Finland, it's about the world, and we're all connected. We're all in the same world. When there's a war in one area, it affects us all, no matter if I'm in New York City. 9/11 happened in New York City. You know what? A lot of those people, unfortunately, they were from the Middle East, and some were educated, some were not. The point is, young kids, when they don't have an opportunity to go and go into school, they will maybe go to the dark side. I'm from Nicaragua, by the way, so I fled a war when I was 9. And what happened in my country was that we had a huge gap between the rich and the poor. And Somoza, unfortunately, had not spent any time or money on educating the poor. And we had a huge illiteracy rate. And so when the Sandinistas came in, the communists came in, they said, we'll educate you. But their education was this: the church is bad, let's burn churches. Communism is good. And this is what they were taught. So now we had a country that believed what they were being taught. And guess what? We had a revolution. We had 15 years of communism in my country because they were educated the wrong thing. So we need schools in order to make sure that education is for the masses, and especially for critical countries and fragile states where we are seeing the wars that are coming from. And again, I can't urge it enough for the Middle East specifically, sub-Saharan Africa as well, but by far the biggest crisis is in the Middle East. Thank you.
Okay.
I would like to just take the last minute.
I'm sorry.
The
I'm
last
sorry,
minute.
Jeff. I'm sorry. You're not allowed to do this. I am sorry. I'm sorry. Okay. Thank you so much to all our speakers. Give them a big round of applause. So now we are moving. We are now going to hand over the motion to you, the audience members. Before you vote, I just want to show you the results of the first vote. And this is shocking to just about everyone in this room right now. How is this possible? There's no way this is true. There is just absolutely. Half of you believe that universities are increasingly irrelevant, and half of you do not believe. This is shocking to me, but it must be true because it's a computer. So, ladies and gentlemen, you've heard all arguments. This is your time to decide whether or not the motion passes. So please vote again. You have 10 seconds to pick either 1, universities are increasingly irrelevant, or 2, universities are still relevant. Please make your vote now. 10 seconds, please. Okay, so the results are in, and the winner is the opposition. You, the audience, have disagreed. I'm sorry. Yes. Right. So the motion does not pass. Okay. Thank you so much to the speakers, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much.